Hello viewers, this is Kiran Shinde, Assistant Professor IICMR MC Department. Welcome back to the video lecture on Advanced Database Management System. And today we are going to discuss on crash recovery and backup topic. So let's start. So first of all, we are going to understand the various types of failures those take place in database system, and then we will try to understand what are the various recovery measures so that we can find some solution to such kind of failures in the databases. So let's start. So what are the various types of failure? Let's first go through all these types. A computer system, like any other mechanical or electrical device, is always subject to failure. And there can be various reasons for these failures. So let us try to address these reasons. There is a variety of causes, such as the failures with respect to disks, failures with respect to power supply, or software or logical failures, or kind of a natural calamity or a fire in the machine room. So these are the types of causes where the failure can happen. Typically, we are going to talk on some special type of failures here with respect to database. First is transaction failure. Now there are two types of errors that may cause a transaction to fail. First, it can be a logical error, such as transaction cannot complete due to some internal error condition with respect to the logic or with respect to the code which you have written, such as bad input, data not found, or overflow or resource limit. So these are some kind of errors I have mentioned here. As a developer, you can very well correlate these particular errors with the help of your code or the programs which you have written by using certain programming languages. So those errors can be categorized as logical errors. Second, system errors. Now, database system must terminate an active transaction due to an error condition such as deadlock, wherein the processes or whatever transactions are trying to get executed at the same time, no transaction can progress further. Such condition, as we understand, is called as deadlock. So in such case, what system has to do? System has to terminate the active transaction. So this is also a kind of failure. Another type of failure is system crash. It can happen due to power failure or any hardware failure or software failure. Disk failure is again a typical type of failure which happens very rarely, but still it is categorized as one of the failure here. A disk block loses its contents as a result of either a head crash, the read-write head of that particular disk may get crashed, or failure during a data transfer operation. So typically these are the types of failures which happen in your database systems. Now, slowly we will move ahead and try to understand the various recovery techniques. So, what are the recovery algorithms? Recovery algorithms are nothing but the techniques which are used to ensure database consistency and transaction atomicity and durability despite the failure. Now, there are three major ACID properties which are listed here: the consistency, atomicity, and durability. In one of my video lecture, we have talked about ACID properties of a transaction. So this recovery agent or these recovery algorithms are typically used to preserve these three major properties of a transaction: consistency, atomicity, and durability. Recovery algorithms are categorized into two parts. The first part focuses on the actions which are taken during normal transaction processing to ensure enough information exists to recover from failures. And second, actions taken after a failure to recover the database contents to a state that of course ensures atomicity, consistency, and durability. So in simple language, if I want to explain you, these are the preventive measures and these are the measures which are taken after the failure has happened. Okay, so this is in case of deadlock, we can say that this is detection technique and this is prevention technique. But in recovery algorithms, the terminologies will be different. Okay, now let us go ahead. To ensure atomicity, despite failures, we first output the information describing the modifications to stable storage without modifying the database itself. It means whatever updations are getting done with respect to different data items, what first major step is taken. We first output all the information which is having modifications which are done to those data items. We store those modifications on stable storage. This procedure will allow us to output all the modifications made by a committed transaction despite failures. What will be the achievement through here? Since all the modifications we are storing onto the stable storage without modifying the actual database itself, even though some kind of failure happens, still we will be able to recover the modified data from the stable storage. Now, to do this, there are two ways, or there are two different techniques which perform such kind of recovery techniques or recovery procedures: log-based recovery and shadow page. Now, first of all, we are going to understand what is log-based recovery. We assume that transactions run serially. So, with respect to these two techniques, whatever discussion we are going to make, the assumption will be the transactions are getting executed serially. So let us try to understand what is log-based recovery. The most widely used structure for recording the database modifications is the log. Now, log is nothing but a special type of record which is maintained for preserving the database consistency. The log is a sequence of log records and it maintains a record of all the update activities in your database. First of all, we will try to see the structure of a log record, which is called update log record. Now, what is the use of update log record? Update log record describes a single database write and has the following fields. Whenever there is a write operation happening, this update log record is maintained for every data item for that particular transaction. Now, let us try to understand the structure of the update log record. Update log record is composed of these four typical fields: TI, XJ, V1 and V2. TI signifies the identifier or the unique identifier of the transaction that has performed write operation on this particular data item. XJ denotes the data item identifier. It is the unique identifier of the data item written. Typically, it is nothing but the location on disk of the data item. So, where exactly that particular data item is written, okay, onto your disk, that can be easily identified with the help of this field. That is nothing but data item identifier. Third field is V1. That is nothing but old value of that particular data item prior to the write operation. And fourth field is V2, that is called as new value. Like after the modification, what is the new value which is getting stored against that particular data item. So these are the four fields with respect to update log record. Other special log records, those exist to record significant events in the database during transaction processing, are start of the transaction and commit of the transaction or abort of the transaction. Now, how these log records are written, or what is the typical way of recording such kind of events in your database log? Let us have a look. We denote these various types of log records as follows. TI start. Now, this is nothing but the start of the transaction, a record, a log record, which is written in order to signify that transaction TI has started. Second example, we have already understood update log record. Third example is TI commit, which denotes that the transaction TI has been committed. And TI abort, this is again a special log record which is conveying the transaction TI has aborted. So these are some more examples of log records. Whenever a transaction performs a write, it is essential that the log record for that write be created before the database is modified. Of course, when we started discussing on log-based or any recovery technique, I made you understand that all the modifications which are done with respect to the data items are first of all stored onto the stable storage before any kind of modification is done on the database. Once a log record exists, we can output the modification to the database if that is desirable. Means first of all, the modifications will be stored in the form of log records onto the stable storage. And if at all any failure happens, then those log records will be referred for checking the status of your database. Also, we have ability to undo a modification that has already been output to the database. we undo by using the old value field in the log records. Now it is very simple to understand. Rather in day-to-day activities, whenever you use Word or Excel or any kind of text editor, you like come across these two operations many a times, undo and redo operation. So here we are going to focus on these two operations only. And with these two operations, we are going to see how these recovery techniques use or how these recovery techniques work. So we undo the transaction or the operation by using the old value field in the log records. For log records to be useful, for in case of recovery from system and disk failures, the log must reside on the stable storage that I already told you. If at all the log is not residing on the stable storage and suppose it is stored on a volatile storage, then of course after the power failure or after the system gets restarted, you will no longer have access to the log records. So it is very important that the log records must be stored onto the stable storage. Now there are two techniques for using the log to ensure the transaction atomicity. What are the two techniques? Deferred database modification and immediate database modification. Now in my next lectures, we are going to talk on how the deferred database modification technique works and immediate database modification technique actually process. Thank you for watching. I hope you must have understood the basics of crash recovery with respect to the failure modifications and various log records. Stay tuned for my next video lectures.